Next up is Mehl with no IT security without free software.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, Balkan, thank you very much for having me here. My name is Mehl. I'm from the Free Software Foundation Europe, and today I would like to talk with you a little bit about the interplay between IT security and free software. That's an interesting field because normally, if you speak to normal people, security is more like something in the hidden, kept secret and not talking about it ideally. But free software is the complete opposite. It's open, it's transparent. So we will together take a look at how this works together and how openness can contribute to security after all. But first of all, I have to give you a little bit of context. Because this is not an average tech conference. BalCCon is quite IT security related. So I guess most people of you will understand or will know the word IT security. That's something. And you will probably think, what will I learn about here and about IT security while we are already at a conference where so many exciting talks about specific security related issues take place. Well, the thing is, we at the Free Software Foundation Europe, in the last recent 18 years now, we spoke to so many people who are completely out of the whole technology bubble that we're in here right now. So we spoke to people who have no idea about technology at all, who live basically on another planet. And, well, while this is not a bad thing, because there is also other worlds outside of our technology bubble. So we developed some kind of different understanding of how those fields, how those different planets work and think, actually. So we started to see something like the bigger picture, or another picture that those people see when they speak about technology and about IT security specifically. So what I will cover today is more like IT security and free software on a meta level, on a more bigger picture level. That sounds really great, but it might be just a little bit different than what you would expect today. So today I won't be speaking about concrete measurements, about specific security precautions that you would have to take or that someone else would have to take so that we all live in a safer world. But I hope I can give you a more general approach and a more general understanding of how we can, in the bigger picture, overall, improve IT security, IT safety in our daily lives, in our societies. So big words, but let's get started with the basics. So first of all, a little bit about myself and the FSFE. We are a charity that empowers users to control technology. So we are user-focused, we care about the users' individual freedoms, and that we all as a society and as individuals are able to control technology, that we understand technology, that we can take an influence, take a stance for technology, and that we can have trust in it. That's one of our goals and the big goals. And then another basic information about free software. Probably all of you heard about free software at least once. But just to be on the safe side. So free software is defined by the 4 essential freedoms. The first freedom that a free software project, that a free software has to bring you, is the freedom to use the software for any purpose. So without any restrictions. So you can use it for your personal usage, for a business, you can use it even for military purposes. Free software gives you all the freedoms to use the software for any purpose. That's great because so many other non-free software restricts the usage and is, for example, not allowed to be installed or run in schools or in businesses. The second freedom is the freedom to study the software, so you or anyone else can take a look at the source code and understand how it works. That's quite important because, well, that's the recipe, how a free software, how a computing mechanism is working. The third freedom is the freedom to share the software. So if you have a free software, you can give it to anyone. To your friends, to your school, to the university, to someone you don't even like. the good thing is, or the interesting thing is, that the price doesn't matter. Many people confuse that. Free software is not about the price. You can earn money with free software. The only thing is that it should not restrict, that it must not restrict any of those 4 freedoms. And the 4th freedom is the freedom to improve the software. So you and anyone else, so you can also contract someone, can make modifications on the software. For the better or for the worse, it doesn't matter. And you can share these improvements with everyone else. So that means that is innovation at a core, because you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You can take work from other people, modify it, improve it, use the freedoms, and then give it back to the community. Any software that is restricting at least one of those 4 freedoms is not free software. It is proprietary or non-free software. That's important. So all those 4 freedoms are embedded in free software. Also important to know is that some people use different terms for free software. So some people say more open source, or FOSS, FLOSS, Libre software. There are many words for that, but don't be confused about the terminology. I'm using here free software, but open source essentially is the same. It's just another term for free software. So let's get to the topic. What is IT security? Well, there are many things about that. But first of all, does anyone know who this person on the picture is? Hands up. Oh, only a few hands. Ah, interesting. Okay, well, this is Bruce Schneier. Bruce Schneier is a quite well-known security researcher, journalist, and he wrote many books. And in one of his early books from 2000, Secret and Lies, he says, security is not a product, it itself is a process. And it's a small sentence, but I find it so important because it boils it down to the very core. So often, marketing tells you that this and that product, this and that project is secure. But in fact, how can they be sure? It's not a product, it's not something that you put on the shelf and say, well, now it's secure and it will be secure forever. Security is an ongoing thing, and it includes so many other things that you cannot just say this is secure or this is not secure. It contains so many other factors that you have to take into consideration. Now, we're going to have a look at how these processes could look like. So, what are the factors that are important for IT security? Now, there are different things. For example, there's the more obvious things that if you ask people on the street what is IT security, most of them could mention a few of those. Code flaws. So you or anyone else as a developer makes a mistake, makes a logical mistake, and therefore you have a security flaw in your software. That happens. That's quite obvious. Encryption as well. You use an algorithm, a method which is not secure anymore, which has been proven to be insecure. That harms your security or the security of the users. But on the next step, if you find those bugs, if you find those mistakes, who's taking care of fixing them? The original developer, the user, the company who just put it in their own product? Then we're thinking about other parts of IT security which are not completely related to code, but more about the collaboration between people and the usage scenarios. Then at second glance, if you look at IT security, there are other things like libraries. I don't mean those buildings with the books in it, but external libraries, external elements that developers can put into their own code. So for example, if you look at a common website, people just use external style sheets or external JavaScript libraries to not have to reinvent the wheel, but base it on the work that's already out there. But do you, as a website operator or software developer, have to take care about the security of this library? Well, that's an open question. You could, but you probably also think that this is a secure product and you don't have to take care of it. But of course, you cannot be sure for sure. Then there's the human factor. Think of a service by a company, and they invest a lot of money into IT security and the best programmers who can make the code really well, and you research a lot. But like by social engineering, just one of the coworkers gives out the whole database of users because they think it's someone else, and well, whole security is blown. So you also have to think of the humans behind, and the humans in the whole supply chain, which can somehow have an influence on security. And of course also customization. Again, imagine you have a you have a software product, and then comes a client and says, well, I would like to have your software, it's great, but please make this modification, then I will buy it. Then comes the second client and the third client and also want to have modifications. Now you don't only have one software, but 3, 4. So you also have to take that into consideration, whether those modifications that you made have an influence on your software, on your security, sorry. And then come the nasty details. For example, business strategy. There's one quite well-known router manufacturer who supported a quite insecure file sharing standard for a long time. And the standard was known to have at least bugs, but probably also security issues. But the company decided to support it because they did not want to lose the customers who depend on this file sharing standard. So what's the right decision here? I mean, if the company really depends on those customers, you don't want to lose it. So what is worth a product that no one buys in the end? So this is, again, a part of a process, again, a part of a thinking process that has to take place if you think about IT security. Or support cycles. Like, take your average smartphone. Does it even receive security updates anymore? Most smartphones, often based on Android, only offer 2 or 3 years security updates. As a company, that might make sense from an economical perspective. But, well, you as a user have to think about that if you think about IT security. And, of course, a company as well. It's quite complicated. And if everything goes wrong in your software, who's liable for it? Can you press legal charges on that if a developer made mistakes? That's also in question. So you see, this is the whole picture of IT security in just a small extract of it. So security is much more than just secure code and encryption. And on an even bigger picture, technology and therefore security is everywhere. In the 21st century, if you think about politics, technology has an influence on really every single issue that is debated right now. Well, think about military. Of course, cyber warfare is everywhere, like that's a buzzword. But think about the health sector. Digitalization in the health sector. Is the state or is anyone else allowed to take all our electronic health data records to improve our health, or at least the general system? Think about social security. What do we do with the data, how much you own and how much you get by your job, and how is digitalization going on there? Or think about education. Of course, there's also a lot of technology involved there. What do we teach our children in schools? Which products, and so on. So technology basically is everywhere, and therefore is also IT security everywhere. But the interesting thing is that so many people, not only in politics, but also in big companies who should know better, don't understand that technology is basically the ground for everything in the 21st century. Because we already see it right now, what influence technology has on us today, but what's in 10, 20, 30, 50 years. So we should think about security and technology now. We should have started 30, 40 years ago. So how can we improve security in technology which is driving our daily lives? My thesis is that free software has a big positive influence on this. But why? Does it work like on this picture? You take a free software license, a GPL license, or any other license approved by OSI or the FSF, and automatically the software is secure. Well, obviously not. It's a little bit more complicated. But there are certain benefits that free software can give to IT security and to IT safety. And this is, I think, because free software itself is a process as well. It, by itself, if you do it right, brings a lot of positive processes into any organization, either if you're a single developer or like a multi-billion company or a state programming software. So I would like to present you a few examples of where I think and where we are sure that they influence positively security. So first of all, free software means transparency for everyone. It allows for independent security audits, like you and anyone else, you can contract that, can issue a security audit on a free software. That increases trust because you do not receive a black box anymore by someone else, but you can be rather sure that you can inspect it and that you can audit it and that if everything is fine, that you have a decent product. So this increases trust also internally. Like everyone also working in a company, working for a free software project can have some more trust into software. And that's important. But there's also some kind of, I would say, kind outside pressure. I see this a lot when speaking at conferences with developers, no matter from which size, and I ask them, why is your software not free software? And this kicks off quite interesting debates because many say, well, you know, free software, it's a nice thing, but I cannot do that for my product, for my project. Why not? Yeah, well, there are those, it would be embarrassing. There are still those parts in the software that I shouldn't release. It would, you know, that's not possible. Seriously? Why do you even release your software in the first place? So if you really go the free software path, you will take another look, unless you're really crazy. I mean, most people would do, and clean that mess up, and then put it online. So this creates some pressure for everyone who is part of it, and which in the end has positive effects for everyone. For yourself, and the people who produce software, and the users in the end. Then, more on the bigger scale, there are a lot of sharing synergies. We see that a lot when administrations, for example cities, work together on software. That happens surprisingly often, and that's a cool development. Those cities who work together, sometimes across borders and continents, on software, bring completely different points of view into a common shared software project. And this is the power of community, because they are not only monolithic and only seeing a narrow way, but they're taking interest in a software project, having their own use cases, having their own perspectives, and contribute to the software. And that is a benefit for security as well, because, well, you think about other paths and what could happen, and you make things differently, and therefore can also have a closer look on security and a more diverse look on security. But yes, some might guess, this can also have downsides, and we will take a look at those later. And last but not least, independence. This often happens when there is a security incident of a product, and the company who is responsible for the software takes a long time to release a patch finally. With free software, if the mitigation to solve this security incident is known, everyone, users, and those who would ask a friend to do that, can patch the software themselves, because it's transparent. It gives you access to it, it gives you control over the software that you're actually running, and to fix security issues on your own, and not be dependent on some third party. And if those incidents happen more than often, well, then free software projects can be forked. You can just say, well, I pick up the work from now and do it better than the company or the project and the community before. This gives a lot of independence and a lot of synergies that people work together, want to work together because, well, they cannot lock in their users. They do not have the full control over their users, but well, it's a shared thing. It's a community issue. So all of this results in the conclusion that free software is a necessary but not sufficient component of IT security. So what do I mean by that? Well, free software is necessary because if you take IT security, IT safety seriously, you should make it free software. It's necessary. If you want to aim to 100% IT security, it has to be free software. Because of the open processes that free software gives you, and that only free software can give you. But it's not sufficient. Only making it free software and creating a nice, friendly community, that's not enough for IT security. Of course, the code also has to be well written and reviewed, and there are so many other parts of the process that we had 2 slides before. So those also have to be taken into consideration. So again, free software is necessary but not sufficient, but it's a big part of IT security. Now, if you go now the free software path with a software project, no matter at which scale, as an individual developer or as a big company or public administration, there are some considerations to make. First of all, responsibilities. So if you work together in a community, who is responsible for the security of the project? And who cares about the security of external dependencies that you take into your project, of some libraries? You have to think about that. It's not unsolvable, but of course it's an issue and it's a challenge. Then, the degree of reuse. Free software is great because we do not have to reinvent the wheel all the time. We can, if you take an average web application, you can take the database from there and the web server from there, the server operating system from somewhere else, and put your own 10 or 20% code on top of it. And it works and you can ship that. That's great. It saves you a lot of time and you can rely on the competence of other people. But on the other hand, then this creates a lot of external dependencies. You cannot check the security of your own product and those of the databases, the web server, blah, blah, blah. So you cannot do that. So this is a risk. On the other hand, you could say, well, I write everything on my own, only tailored towards my needs, and I know what's inside of the software, and that's fine. But then this again puts a lot of responsibility to you. So you have to write everything on your own. So this is a consideration to make, that many projects and many people who want to make free software and who do it on their daily basis have to do all the time. And this also has an influence on security, of course, because, well, it depends on which path you take. Then there is this consideration of national security. That's really nice if you speak to people from politics and they say, well, free software, that's great, but we cannot make our projects free software because it would harm our national security. I mean, the code in there, that's our secrecy, and it would harm us. It would harm the government if everyone would know how things go within the state. Yeah, well, that's always an interesting discussion, but it's the core of the question is quite interesting. Is there software that whose release would be disadvantageous for the society? And I would say, well, there might be a few edge cases where this is actually the case. Think about in the military sector. Should the software running drones and exploding bombs be public? I'm not so sure about that. But that's a consideration to take. But the essence is that I guess for 99.9% of the software, this does not apply. It does not harm the national security. And we'll come back to that later when speaking about critical infrastructure. And of course, again, there are other components of security. So think about free hardware. What is worth a perfectly fine, secure free software if the chips underneath are containing backdoors? You think about reproducible builds. That's a great thing, that you can prove that the binaries, that the output of the program actually matches the source code that has been audited, ideally. And of course, all those other processes and parts of security. And then there are those common counter-arguments that you have to face. Again, often happens when you talk to people from public administrations. Well, free software is great, but only for non-critical things. The exact opposite is the case. If you think about critical infrastructure, public infrastructure, things that our daily lives are based upon, it has to be open and transparent. So because we as a society want to have trust in those systems, we want to have trust in the roads that we drive our cars on, but we also want to have trust in the software that stores our health records. So the more critical, the more public it becomes, the more important it is that the processes behind it are open and transparent, and also with the advantages for our security. Then also public code means risk. That's also quite nice and often heard, but of course definitely wrong. The principle of security by obscurity has been proven wrong for so many times. Source code can often be reconstructed, even from binaries, and I mean also attacks on pure black boxes where attackers don't know anything about the system behind it often are successful. So instead of investing time on keeping the source code secret, we should invest time and resources to make the software actually secure. And free software has the potential to get more people on board to make a software secure. So we should apply Kirchhoff's principle, he said that to encryption mechanisms or to algorithms, that the method to keep something secret or to make something encrypted has to be open. But of course the secret itself, the data, should always be kept secret and kept hidden and kept secure. So we should separate that, and making a software free software does not mean that the data and the sensible privacy-related data has to be open. And interestingly, still don't, many actors in, like from those other worlds that we speak with, still don't understand that. Then often heard is that free software is only done by and for hobbyists, and therefore they do not have the resources to make it secure. That's also wrong. If we take a look at the Linux kernel, it's the majority of contributors, of code contributors, are from big IT corporations which hopefully do understand something about IT security. Look at companies like Red Hat, or foundations like Apache, Mozilla, or even companies like Microsoft who now embrace free software and say, well, that's the basis for our future cloud business. So, well, there must be something about it. Or if you look at virtualization in the sector where almost everything is free software, or content management systems. The majority of all websites is based on free software. And there's the argument of business secrets. That if you speak to owners of companies whom you tell about free software, say, well, yes, it's great, but I cannot open up the code of my software because, well, it would directly harm my business. And to be honest, I can sometimes, in some cases, understand that. Imagine a company having as a solution, the code solution for one pressing issue, and they are really superior in their solution. So opening up the code, the mechanism, the method to solve a specific issue with source code would harm their business, obviously. So these are the few edge cases. But the majority of all businesses and business models is compatible with free software. So this is sometimes a valid argument, but in most cases not. So to apply this to reality now, I would like to make an example or speak about an example, namely Huawei. This popped up in February this year, where Huawei, a Chinese company which produces smartphones but is also leading in 5G network equipment, so the next generation mobile internet standard. They have been accused by the US government that they are spying on their users, that the Chinese government or Huawei themselves implement backdoors in the network equipment of 5G infrastructure and other equipment. And that was quite an interesting debate because finally, on a large scale, people talked about trust issues in critical infrastructure. And I can understand them. Not because Huawei is a Chinese company. I also wouldn't trust US companies or Swedish companies. But it's a general mistake. We are basing our daily communication and also in the future perhaps a lot of industry things and public infrastructure on top of black boxes. So we at the FSFE thought about how we could solve this puzzle. And it turned out that free software could be a really viable solution to solve these trust issues inside of critical infrastructure. Because free software fosters trust. You can trust in a free software. You can trust in a system that has free software in it. Because it's transparent and because it has it solves this riddle of trust. You can make independent security audits, like not you yourself, but also agencies, companies, you can hire people to do that. And those agencies, those national agencies, who usually check the security of this kind of critical network equipment, can share their work. Because their budget, if you look at agencies in Germany, Austria, Serbia probably as well, it's much smaller than the budget of Huawei, for example. So, but with free software, if the code of such a critical infrastructure would be free software, they could share their work and distribute those security checks. Another quite interesting thought is that competition adds another pressure, an additional pressure on those companies giving this or creating this critical infrastructure. Because how nice would it be for Huawei to find a backdoor inside of Cisco equipment? Yeah, that would be quite nice, right? Then agencies can also turn down a little bit and let them others do. But again, it's also important that reproducibility is given and that free hardware is available. So again, what's the best, secure, most free software if the chips on the bottom of the software are containing backdoors? So this is another factor that we have to take into consideration. Now, you would think that's completely unrealistic. Huawei would never open up their source code and, well, I can say, well, I think as well. I think so too. I think we are too late now for Huawei specifically. But Huawei kicked off, or this case Huawei kicked off a debate inside of ministries and public administrations and politics about how we can trust our critical infrastructure. And interestingly, when we summarized those ideas and made a press statement in February this year, it has been picked up surprisingly often, and we have been invited to a few meetings, also in a German ministry, to present those ideas and to discuss it. Because they see those issues as well. Not everyone, but a few. So it starts. It starts that we think as a society, we start to think about how we can control the technology that drives our communication and our daily lives. So I think that in the long term, we will see a lot of more discussions of those kinds and hopefully evaluate free software to be one of the solutions to have more trust in public infrastructure and to increase the IT security. So, what I would like to ask you to do is two things. First of all, if the next security incident happens, and it will surely happen in a few weeks probably, then please think about whether free software could have at least mitigated parts of this issue. Think about whether a state infrastructure or the next hospital which got miraculously hacked by some Trojans or whatever, think about it whether free software could have had a positive effect on that and could have solved that. And second of all, please give us feedback. If you think that some of those arguments that I just presented are wrong, or that we should focus on other arguments, please let me know. Even like after the talk, or write me an email. That would be really nice, because we really urgently have to think about how to solve those issues, because yes, technology is everywhere and we have to think about IT security, and if we don't do it, probably no one will. So thank you for your attention, and at this note also thanks to all the FSFE supporters who support our work. Thank you very much. Any questions? Any feedback?
So, thanks for the presentation.
Not really.
Yeah, so it's okay. I can shout.
Okay.
Okay, thanks for the presentation. So I have a question about regarding this regulation about the government procurement methods, right?
Mm-hmm.
So back a couple of years ago, I was a team lead for building CAP, the Cyber Assurance Program for the United States government and the White House. So basically, it was a program where when a government is making some procurement, it needs to be some kind of standard against the cybersecurity posture and hygiene in place. And that time it was mostly about vulnerability assessment, penetration tests, the side channel attacks, and hardware implants and stuff like that. We tried really hard to push some kind of open source, right, requirements. And the main reason that they didn't go on was Microsoft, Oracle, Cisco, by the time Cisco, and other companies which are above any other government, and they will never ever allow that kind of requirement to be in place. So what do you think, by the way, I'm from Amsterdam, so what we can do in Europe regarding in United States, right? So is there anything that you guys can guide the governments to put a requirement that everything that they're going to buy is going to be used by a public people of Europe, that this technology needs to provide to a third party and open source foundations their source code so we can audit that? Or is there something that you guys are pushing something like this, or yeah, that's my question.
Yeah, funnily, I have the correct T-shirt for that right now. So this is an initiative, Public Money, Public Code, that we are running since 2 years. It's directly aimed at this issue. Like, there are big corporations, and there are also, like, not only corporations, but also, like, politicians who do not want to have free software, because they do not understand free software, probably, most probably. So, for example, Amsterdam is a good example because they're pushing forward to that, but a really good example is Barcelona, for example. They noticed that they're dependent on proprietary software, on external contractors, and that they're really kept imprisoned by them, basically. So they started an initiative a few years ago, and it's in a really good shape because they set up policies how to make tenders for free software. So this happens with a few steps. So first of all, they say, well, 70% of the IT budget that we are spending has to go, especially for creating new software, not only buying new software, but creating, has to be spent for free and open source software. So they set a set of licenses that are required, and it's put in the contracts. That's the first good step. But they also included local economy in this process. They said, well, we have to enable smaller and medium-sized companies to participate in those tenders. Because if you look at tenders, for example, on the EU level, it's so complicated and there are so many requirements that only big corporations can ever make. But free and open source software, I think, it's really strong in small and medium-sized enterprises. And there it has its roots. So they enabled, or they lowered the requirements and made it possible for smaller companies, for local companies, to participate in tenders. So that was another good step. And they did not only speak about it and made abstract laws, but put policies in place. So policies for public servants to open tenders for free software. So that they understand on the ground to do the actual work why free software is important and how to procure free software. Because we see that, for example, in Italy, I don't know how many years ago, they implemented a law, or they published a law which basically is public money, public code. They say, well, all software funded by the state, by the government, by the public has to be free software. What happened? Unfortunately, not much. They are currently in a good implementation process, but they also had to learn that just writing laws is not enough. You have to convince the middle and the lower grounds about the benefits of free software as well. So it's a long path, and we at the FSFE are providing resources for that. For example, if you come by the booth that I have over there, we created a brochure summarizing free software, the benefits, in their language. Because right now, or before that, if you researched as a public servant, as a politician who doesn't know much about technology, you didn't really find resources that explain it to you and give you good examples for that. So we compiled that. And this enables also other people, not only us at the FSFE, but also other NGOs, other individuals, activists on the ground in smaller and medium-sized cities to get active as well. So what we need really is to think about the strategy, how we can make it decentralized. So not only convince one state and then say, woo, great, and then the government changes and everything is destroyed again, every effort, but to start on the lower ground. And another strategy that we learned, if I may say, is that we do not start, for example, in cities with moving to, for example, Linux-based desktops, where then all the applications that existed are not running anymore on those desktops. And then you have to start to freeing up the desktops, and then everyone complains. So what we should rather do is concentrate on software at first that is newly created on this application level. And this happens quite often. Like, I mean, it starts with the easy things, like a small town wants to create a tourist app, like that tourists can download and with some coupons and whatever, some benefits. And so often this is proprietary software and extremely expensive. So every small town in a touristic region needs such an app, or may need such an app. So that would be a great example for a free software thing. So if we start in the small steps, we can, in the end, be in a position where we can basically switch the operating without anyone noticing. So that was also a turn-off strategy. But I completely agree, it's a long way, definitely. And so we have to take into consideration so many different aspects of free software. And so not only saying, well, it's cheaper, and that's only the case in long term, but also like the general things that we as a public pay for the software, so we should own it, or also the security things. So that's what I was doing today, saying, well, if you want to have secure software, make it free software. Write it in your tenders. I hope that long thing answered your question.
Hi. Are the Free Software Foundation Europe partnering with any vendors or software bespoke companies with this public code initiative?
Not directly, no. So many companies like what we do, especially free software companies, because, well, they might get into a better position of that, but we do not have direct cooperation with them, because we also want to stay independent and do not want to be seen as a lobbying organization just for those few free software organizations, free software companies. So ideally, also now proprietary companies could also create free software. Why not? You don't have to be a free software company to write free software. So it could also well be that if in a tender, for example, there's a requirement to make it just a free software product in the end, they could also easily publish that and create that. So that would be possible. Why not? Other feedback and questions? Doesn't seem so. So please come by the booth and talk with me and give me personal feedback or via email. Thank you very much.